When I first bought the Java Neo 3, I wasn't looking for the lightest folding bike or the one with the fanciest components. What I wanted was something compact enough to take on trains and flights, but capable enough to take on bikepacking adventures. After riding it for a few hundred kilometers though, I started noticing a few things that could be better. Nothing major, just small things that over long days on the bike really start to add up. So over the past few months, I've slowly been changing the Java Neo 3 into what I think is my ideal bikepacking folder. And today, I want to show you everything I changed, and more importantly, why. What makes a good bikepacking folder? I chose the Neo 3 because it already checked a lot of the boxes I was looking for. It's compact, practical, easy to transport, and reliable enough for everyday riding. But bikepacking asks a little more from a bike. Comfort suddenly becomes a much bigger deal when you're spending 8 or even 10 hours in the saddle day after day. Climbing becomes more important too. A bike that feels perfectly fine unloaded can feel completely different once you've added another 10 or 15 kilograms of camping gear. And perhaps the biggest challenge with folding bikes is this. Every upgrade has the potential to make the bike worse at folding. Bigger tires, fenders, racks, they all improve something, but they can also take away one of the biggest reasons you bought the bike in the first place. So my goal throughout this build was pretty simple. Make the bike better for bikepacking without losing what made it a great folding bike to begin with. So let's start with comfort. The first thing I changed wasn't anything fancy, it was the grips. The stock round grips are perfectly fine for commuting, but once your rides start stretching into hundreds of kilometers, you begin to notice how much pressure is concentrated on a small part of your palm. After riding a couple of brevets, I learned just how important hand comfort really is. Ergonomic grips spread that pressure over a much larger area, reducing hot spots and helping prevent numb hands over long days in the saddle. For me, this wasn't really an upgrade. It was a necessity. The next thing I changed was the saddle. After a few rides, I found myself constantly shifting around trying to get comfortable. At first, I blamed the bike. I adjusted the saddle height, moved it forward, moved it backward. But eventually I realized it wasn't the bike. It was simply the saddle. So I swapped it with my favorite saddle, a Brooks C15 style saddle from West Biking. Immediately, the bike felt much better on longer rides. Now, saddles are probably the most personal component on any bike. What works for me might not work for you, so don't be afraid to experiment until you find one that fits you. Next came the tires. The Neo 3 comes with 20 by 1.5 inch Kenda tires. And honestly, I didn't have any major complaints with them. But I've always been a fan of Continental tires, and luckily they make the Contact Urban in exactly the size I wanted. They're fast, they're durable, they roll incredibly well on pavement. And honestly, I still think they're some of the best looking tires you can put on a folding bike. After riding them for the past few months across tarmac, gravel, wet roads, and even some fast descents, I can confidently say they've been one of my favorite upgrades. Since this bike has become my go-to bike for errands, weekend rides, and longer endurance rides, adding fenders was an easy decision. Anyone who's ridden through wet roads knows exactly what I'm talking about. Without them, you end up with a soaked back. Or worse, you look like you've had a very unfortunate accident. Not exactly the look we're going for, so on went the fenders. Of course, no bike upgrade is ever completely free. The slightly larger tires solved one problem, but immediately created another. When folded, the rear tire now rubbed against the top tube, making the bike much harder to roll around. Not the end of the world, but definitely annoying enough that I knew I'd have to fix it. Then came the second problem. The fenders. They kept me clean. But now, when the bike was folded, the rear fender became the first thing touching the ground instead of the easy wheels, which meant the bike couldn't roll properly anymore. So in trying to improve the bike, I'd accidentally made one of its best features worse. The funny thing is, I wasn't even planning on installing a rear rack, but it ended up solving both problems at once. With the rear rack and additional easy wheels installed, the bike could roll properly again. The larger tires were no longer an issue. The fenders no longer interfered with folding. And as a bonus, I now had a much better platform for carrying luggage. 2 problems solved with 1 upgrade. I definitely call that a win. The last thing I wanted to improve was climbing. In my review, I mentioned that the stock gearing was perfectly fine for everyday riding. And I still stand by that, but bikepacking changes everything. Once you start adding camping gear, food, water, and other essentials, those climbs suddenly become a lot steeper. There are a few ways to make climbing easier. For me, the simplest solution was reducing the chainring from 50 teeth down to 42. That brings the bike down to roughly 21 gear inches, which is a huge help on long climbs. Now you might be wondering, doesn't that make the bike too slow? Actually, no. I even made my own gear calculator to check. With the 42-tooth chainring, cruising at around 25 kilometers per hour is still very comfortable. And honestly, for multi-day touring, I'd rather have easier climbing than a higher top speed. With that said, this is the final build. So, would I build it the same way if I had to start over? Absolutely. Looking back, there isn't a single upgrade here that I'd undo. Every single one solved the problem I encountered while actually riding the bike. Some people might skip the fenders and simply let their rear bag catch the spray. That's a perfectly reasonable choice. For me though, I'd rather keep both my back and my luggage clean. The funny thing is, none of these upgrades completely transform the bike on their own. But together, they turned the Java Neo 3 into something that fits the way I like to ride. And I think that's what makes building a bike so rewarding. It's not about making it perfect, it's about making it yours. Now all that's left to do is take it on its first real bike-packing adventure. I'll see you on the next ride.
Ako